Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to the Kings River Water Quality Coalition. This is our annual workshop webinar. My name is Jarrett Winther. I am a resource analyst with the Kings River Conservation District. There is some contact information if you need to contact the coalition. This is just a list of some of the other workshops and webinars that we have held and will hold this year. Just as a reminder, if you aren't able to meet or you're not able to attend these in person or webinar workshops, and you never need to, there's always a recording of one of those that is put on the member portal, and you can view that anytime, essentially from March to the end of October. There is no due date on outreach like there is the reports. So essentially you can just meet that requirement anytime throughout the year. This is our outline for today. We're going to cover submittals, templates, and what to keep on farm for this year. Some general order reminders and regional board enforcement activities. Some really quick coalition activities, what we've been up to this past year. Some brief information on the groundwater protection targets. We did have our first on-farm inspection by the Regional Water Board this year. We were kind of just waiting for those to happen. So one finally did. So we are going to cover that and what that looks like. We will also be covering nitrogen use evaluations, and for the second half of the presentation, Dr. Culumber will be presenting on nitrogen and irrigation efficiencies. There is a survey at the end. We do appreciate your thoughts. We'll send that out as a link. There will also be a QR code put on the screen at the end of Dr. Culumber's presentation, and we will also send that information out to your email address, whichever email address you registered with. If you have any questions during the presentation, please just go ahead and type those in the Q&A chat, and you can find those at the bottom of your Zoom menu. Due March 1st, 2024 is the Irrigation Nitrogen Management Plan Summary Report. This is required for all members and should be submitted through the KRWQC member portal. Paper submittals are not accepted. There is a late fee for reports submitted after March 1st. As a reminder, the planning portion of the Irrigation and Nitrogen Management Plan worksheet is to be completed and kept on farm for the 2024 year. And then take a look at your worksheet from last year and make sure that is completed, and then you have the actuals filled in for the previous crop year. Just as a reminder, all commercially irrigated farmland must be enrolled in the Irrigated Lands Program unless it is already covered under a different general order. This does include irrigated pasture. If you start farming new land, please just make sure that that is enrolled either by calling the coalition, or you can also add those parcels through the member portal on the member information section. Really quick on some regional board enforcement activities. There were 87 directive letters sent out for enrollment. Out of those 87 directive letters, 29 were followed up with notice of violations. Essentially, the way it works is that the directive letter is just a legal directive to comply. If that is not followed, that is followed up by a notice of violation. With that, you still have the opportunity to comply. If you receive any of those letters ever, please, first thing, just call the coalition and we'll point you in the right direction. Another reminder, the drinking water well monitoring requirement began in 2020 for Tulare Lake Basin coalitions. Active drinking water wells on parcels enrolled in the Irrigated Lands Program needed to be first sampled for nitrates by December 31st, 2020, which was the deadline for the first year of the program. An active well is used for human consumption. If your well is not active, you do not have to sample. Just contact the Central Valley Water Board and just let them know that that well is not used for drinking water. You may need to submit some supplementary documentation, maybe where you actually are getting your water from, receipts for bottled water or whatnot. So based upon the nitrate sampling results for the drinking water, follow-up actions may be needed, and those are all dependent on what your results have been. So nitrate results less than 8 milligrams per liter. If you've been sampling that or testing at that for 3 consecutive years, your sampling frequency does move to every 5 years. So if you started sampling in 2020 and your samples have all been less than 8 milligrams per liter, you may have already received a notice from the regional water board saying that you can now sample every 5 years. Nitrate results between 8 and 10 milligrams. You just continue sampling annually. Nitrate results above the 10 milligrams per liter. You do not have to sample anymore. You just want to let the water board know that you have tested over that. And there may be some additional steps that need to be followed. If there's residents living in that home, you may need to provide a notice that well is tested high. Also, within the Kings Subbasin, alternative drinking water can be applied through the Kings Water Alliance. So if those wells ever test high over that 10 milligrams per liter, you can contact that program and we can try to set you up with some alternative drinking water. Some other coalition activities include our monthly surface water monitoring. So this past year, obviously we had a lot of water. 9 out of 9 water sites were monitored last year, 2023. Some of those exceedances from last year would be molybdenum, TDS, which is total dissolved salts, E. coli, and fecal coliform. Our surface water quality management plan was submitted August 31st of 2023 as required from more than one exceedance within 3 years. However, no management plans were triggered since the constituents that were in exceedance would not or could not be affected by changing any farming practices. If any constituents were ever tested, that could be improved by management practices. Those management plans are triggered. What happens is some focused outreach for that area, possibly some implementation of new management practices, and then also some continued monitoring. So groundwater protection targets. These are the desired loads or concentrations that are necessary to achieve compliance with receiving water limits for groundwater and are informed by available data and information. The goal is to reduce nitrogen on a township level. Looking forward, a workshop plan will be submitted to validate the model, meaning essentially just test the model if it's accurate, if it's meeting real world results there. The groundwater protection process will be incorporated into our groundwater quality management plan later this year. And at that time, we can provide some more information. So sticking with those groundwater protection targets, here are some established values and milestones. So the left side of the image shows load estimates or current load estimates, and the right side of the image shows the prioritized load reduction in a township. Milestones are intended to assist growers in working towards achieving the groundwater protection targets ultimately resulting in compliance with receiving water limits. The coalition is currently working on additional outreach materials, and that will be distributed to members. Regional board on-farm inspections. So again, we were kind of waiting for one of these to happen, and it finally did. So the coalition, with the regional water board and the grower, they all kind of work together within this process. The regional board selected members based on non-submittal of the irrigation and nitrogen management plan summary report. So that's a change from previous regional board practices where they're essentially just picking those randomly. Now they are specifically targeting growers or members who are not submitting that irrigation and nitrogen management plan report. The way the process is initiated is the regional board contacts the coalition, and we contact the member to start preparation for that inspection. And the more time we have to, excuse me, go back to that slide here. So the more time, obviously, we have to prepare, the better. That preparation would involve making sure all the required reports are completed and submitted, as well as a pre-inspection with coalition staff. The Kings River staff will assist the member through each step of the process. The priority inspection areas for the regional board were, again, report submittals, and if you don't have those in place, we'll help you get those in place. Some groundwater protection practices, wells, and chemical storage. So for the reports, they're looking at the farm evaluation, groundwater management practice implementation report, the irrigation and nitrogen management plan worksheet, summary report, obviously, and then the sediment and erosion control plan, which doesn't apply to most of our membership base. Out of about 3,500 members we have, that applies to around roughly 90. So another a point of inspection were active wells. So you just always want to make sure that you keep those free of trash and anything that could have any type of negative impact on groundwater quality. Also, abandoned wells. So abandoned wells should be properly covered if temporarily inoperable, or destroyed through your county's permitting process if permanently abandoned. So this is just a rundown of some of the priorities that the regional board had during the inspection. Again, the farm evaluation, that was last submitted March of 2021 and is due every 5 years now. Again, the INMP worksheet, irrigation management practices. So do you have a backflow preventive check valve where you need one? Are irrigation lines maintained properly? Is there any sediment and erosion? So again, that doesn't apply to a lot of our members, but anything being discharged off the farm, you want to take a look at that. Also, riparian or aquatic habitat protection. So does your operation border any other body of water, such as a river, and are you causing any harm? Active wells, again, should be free of trash, anything that can have a negative impact on water quality. Abandoned wells should be properly covered if temporarily destroyed. I'm sorry, abandoned wells should be properly covered if temporarily abandoned or destroyed, again, through your county's permitting process. Pesticide management. So our farm conditions consistent with the farm evaluations description. So what you are submitting on your farm evaluation, does that match up with what the regional board is seeing on farm? Are pesticide containers rinsed out and disposed of in areas that prevent discharge to surface water and groundwater? And chemical storage and handling. So are chemicals stored in a way that is protective of water quality away from wells or surface water? The post-inspection report that was provided by the regional board. So this is just a little snippet out of there, but it essentially gives the overview of their findings and what they submitted. was that the observed site conditions of the parcels generally appeared to be in compliance with the waste discharge requirements. So through our management practices evaluation program, acceptable ranges for the multi-year ratio targets and values of applied nitrogen are required to be developed. There will be more information on this in the future. This is all, it's kind of being put together and developed now. Under the WETA grant, the Water Efficiency Technical Assistance Program, the MPEP is currently developing trainings and outreach materials to assist with this groundwater protection process. Crop Manage. So this is a new software that's kind of making its way through the population, and it's being developed at the University of California, ANR. Dr. Culumber will touch on this a little bit more too. I'm really just wondering if anyone out there has any experience with this, if you have any thoughts on it, and if you'd like to share those, please just contact the coalition. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Nitrogen evaluation packets for all members are in the process of being mailed out. The nitrogen evaluation compares nitrogen applications amongst coalition members with the same crop for the previous 3 years if available. The analysis includes a summary of INP summary report data, so that information you submit each year on your nitrogen report. The 3-year nitrogen evaluation with outlier identification. So we're not just looking at 1 year, we're taking into account 3 years. And that is indicated on your evaluation there. Also, it will let you know if you have been identified or those parcels have been identified as an outlier within that multi-year evaluation. Some reasons a parcel may not have the 3-year value is an APN not being enrolled or farmed by the same member for the previous 3 years, or the same crop isn't grown on that parcel consecutively. Members without 3 years of data will be provided an analysis and comparison for a single year. The analysis uses the risk metric of applied nitrogen minus removed nitrogen. The nitrogen left over is what is potentially leached to groundwater. Each report is private and specific to each grower. Parcels identified as outliers may be required to complete additional outreach. Parcels identified being in a low vulnerable area will require INP certification. So this is just a portion of the evaluation that you receive in the mail. So kind of looking at this left to right, you have your parcel here, the county, if that crop is mature or juvenile, so over or less than 4 years. And then you have this 3-year applied N over removed N, that is that 3-year ratio. And just next to that, that is your 3-year outlier threshold. So you don't want your 3-year number to surpass that outlier threshold. Moving on, you have your 3-year total applied N. So this is the amount of nitrogen that was applied over 3 years. This is the amount of nitrogen that is thought to be removed by the crop over those 3 years. And then you have this A minus R, and that is what is left over in nitrogen and what could potentially make its way into the groundwater. So really quick, just on outliers here. So if you are identified as an outlier, the coalition will contact you regarding any additional requirements. The first meeting for outliers was held this last December for nut crops, and we will also be holding another one later this week for citrus and stone fruit. The next meeting, is February 2nd. and that is for the citrus and stone fruit group. Meetings for other crops identified as an outlier will be held later this year. Here's some contact information for the coalition. If you need to contact us, you can also always go to our website. You can make a virtual appointment. We'll schedule an appointment either over the phone or via Zoom if you're comfortable with that. Again, please just chat any questions through the Q&A. And now I'm going to introduce Dr. Culumber. She's with the University of California Cooperative Extension. She's a farm advisor for Fresno and Kings County. She does serve portions of Tulare under a specific program, and I think she might get into that a little bit later. Her background is a PhD in soil science and agroecology, a master's in plant science and molecular ecology, and her bachelor's in biology. Her focus is on enhancing the sustainability and viability of nut crop agriculture by conducting applied research and providing outreach education in soil, water, and nutrient management. Research is focused on finding practical, sustainable solutions that are feasible to implement in orchard operations. So grower consulting services are available under nitrogen and irrigation initiative funds. If you're interested, please contact the coalition at 559-365-7958 or at our email address there, info@kingsriverwqc.org. Again, there's a survey link at the end of Dr. Culumber's presentation. We will also be chatting that out to the group, and we'll also be providing that in an email after the webinar. So with that, I will go ahead and turn this over to Dr. Culumber. I appreciate everyone's attention. Thank you.
Good morning. Jarrett, thanks for the introduction. I hope that you can all see my screen. Okay, so as Jarrett mentioned, today I was going to talk about irrigation and nitrogen use efficiency. And so a lot of times when we talk about irrigation and nitrogen management, they're presented as separate topics. But in terms of trying to maximize efficiency of nitrogen uptake for our crops, we really need to think about these two things together. So with respect to nitrogen, ideally we would get 100% uptake of all the nitrogen that we're applying. But the efficiency that we achieve is really dependent on a lot of factors. The timing is particularly important. Are we matching timing with uptake of the crop that we're growing? And then also just a lot of conditions in the environment, as well as the characteristics of the type of fertilizer that we're applying can affect different pathways that the nitrogen can go other than uptake to the crop. And so in a not ideal situation, we could lose nitrogen to gaseous losses, either through volatilization or a process called denitrification. We can lose nitrogen in runoff, in the form of runoff, if we're applying to saturated soils, and we have water running off from the field. And then probably most commonly, we can have losses to leaching below the root zone, out of the reach of the crops, and possibly entering the groundwater. So as I mentioned, the nitrogen form can affect your efficiency. That efficiency is going to depend on how long nitrogen resides in the soil as plant available N. And so different fertilizers, have different portions of ammonium versus nitrate. Ammonium is a positively charged ion, and so we tend to think that in the ammonium form, that's going to be attracted to our mostly negatively negatively charged soils that we commonly have in our growing areas. And so that ammonium is going to tend to reside in the soil a bit longer than, say, nitrate. So something like a can 17 that has more nitrate composition than, say, ammonium sulfate or urea or any of these other ones I have listed here. Is going to be more susceptible to loss more quickly because it has more of it in the nitrate form. But eventually, um, any excess nitrogen, so if we're applying more nitrogen than what's needed for the crop, that excess nitrogen can be lost through those pathways that I mentioned in the beginning, but particularly most commonly lost through leaching as nitrate. And this is because when converted to nitrate, that negatively charged ion, it does not absorb to those negatively charged surfaces that we have in our soils. And so the nitrate ions move more freely with drainage water and they're easily leached. So with keeping that in mind, this is the outline that I'm following for the talk. I'm just going to cover some different topics related to irrigation and how that can affect our nitrogen efficiency. So first, talking about irrigation system distribution uniformity and efficiency. So when we talk about distribution uniformity, what we're referring to is how even the outflow of water is from across all of the different emitters across the field. And so a way that you can measure that is actually an example here in this screenshot overview of a field where we've taken some measurements, is to actually measure the outflow and pressure at different emitter points in the field. And so as you can imagine, you're probably going to have a different flow rate close to the pump, where the water's entering the irrigation system, compared to the far ends of the field where we have our furthest emitters. And so we can look at the average of all of these across the field to determine, what's our average distribution uniformity. And so as in the picture here, basically what that consists of is taking timed readings, looking at the flow of water into cups. And so we're measuring the exact volume over a period of time. And then the way the DU is calculated is that we average the lowest quarter. So the emitters with the lowest output, the lowest quarter of those, averaged over all of the volumes measured. And that will give us our DU percentage. So with the DU, a lot of irrigation or micro irrigation systems, are very highly efficient. And so we might expect most of them, especially if they're new, to be getting a DU probably around 90%. But even with a 90% distribution uniformity, we should realize that there is still some variability in the water application that we're going to see in the field. So even in the table here where we have a 90% DU, and if we think about if we divided the field up into quarters, where where we have the high quarter, so that portion of the orchard that's has the highest flow rates coming from emitters, and compare that to the lowest quarter, when say the target was to apply 1 inch, we're applying a bit more than an inch in the high quarter and less than an inch in the low quarter. And so the difference across one irrigation cycle could be a 1/4 inch of water from those different locations. And then over the course of the season, that could be a difference of 6 or more inches of water applied. There's a lot of water quality issues in the valley, and I think I just had an email this morning regarding scale calcium carbonate, and their irrigation system is causing them to have some issues. And so if those problems go unaddressed, we can see a lot of clogging over time. And so we might see a decrease in our DU score. And so if you have a field that has only 70% distribution uniformity, that targeted inch could be applying as much as 1.4 inches for the high quarter and as low as 0.7 inches for the low quarter. So you could have the difference of 3/4 of an inch across one irrigation set and close to 22 inches over the course of 30 irrigation cycles during the season. So you can see that attention to how well the irrigation system is performing is tremendously important, because we want to be getting as uniform application of water and nutrients to the crop as possible. And so these diagrams illustrate that. And so in a system, say we had that 70% DU, this shows, in some areas we're getting much more water than what was targeted below the root zone of the trees. And then in other areas, the trees may be working with the deficit. Um, and then another scenario, which is probably really common because most of our irrigation systems probably have a 85 to 90% distribution uniformity, so that you have good system DU with your irrigation system. But if we have poor irrigation scheduling, so if we're applying more water than what the crop is taking up, then we're going to have low efficiency. So this scenario B is pushing water far down below the root zone. And then the bottom diagram is a good DU with good irrigation scheduling. And so in this scenario, we've got good DU and we're also doing a good job with irrigation scheduling. So we're going to have even nutrient application and retention through the root zone. So this is some NDVI imagery that a grower shared with me of an almond orchard. And so you can see, in different portions of the field, this is the blue colors indicate low stress with the trees, and then as they transition to red, that's higher stress. And so you can see that there may be some irrigation system problems here where these are likely the risers. We're getting a high level of flow rate close to the risers, but then at the far ends of the field toward the end of the lines, that's where trees are coming under higher stress. And so if you're utilizing these tools for your irrigation system for irrigation scheduling, it can also be a really good diagnostic to find where these problem areas are in your field that you need to address. So, those small micro emitters are really highly susceptible to clogging and leaks. So as I mentioned, there's high levels of bicarbonate in a lot of the growing areas, high pH water, high levels of calcium and magnesium. Those are all conditions that are conducive to clogging, particularly when we're injecting and if we're not flushing water from the system adequately, that can further cause problems with precipitation and clogging. So we want to make sure that we're routinely examining nozzles, looking at the wetting patterns. That's always a good indication. You want to make sure you're flushing lines and cleaning filters on a regular basis. And then, install and check flow meters. And a lot of these systems that, where you have an on-site weather station, they offer, or soil moisture sensors. You could put in an inlet pressure sensor so that that's always a good indication that you can track when the irrigation is on or off, and if it's running at the pressure that it should be. And then it's also handy to if you just have a handheld inlet pressure system, you can check the pressure at different parts of the field when the irrigation system's running to sort of perform that sort of DU test on your own. Okay, so now talking about the importance of soil texture. We're going to talk about this in the terms of understanding what are the storage capacity of the soil for water based on soil texture. And so later in the talk, I'm going to go over a few irrigation scheduling examples, and we'll be referring back to this. Just thinking about how much moisture can the soil hold, and how does that affect the irrigation set length and the frequency between irrigation sets. And so if we have sandy textured soil, sand has the largest particle size of all the different types of soil particles. If it's sand, silt, or clay, it's actually, order of magnitude or more larger than silt and clay. So, 1 grain of sand has more surface area than 1 particle of silt or clay. But when we think about this cumulatively, in the volume of soil, we're going to end up having more surface area with those clay textured soils than with sand, and so greater water holding capacity. The other side of that is because sand doesn't hold water as well, it also has better permeability, and so that's going to actually allow water to infiltrate faster through the soils. And this graph shows the volume of soil water for different sand textures, and all of that water that's being held isn't necessarily available to the crops. So we're going to talk a little bit about trying to target our irrigation scheduling to maintain adequate available water to the crops. And another illustration or another way of thinking about that is if you think of, the soil as being like a cup. And if the cup is all the way filled, you're going to have saturated type conditions. When all of the, when excess water, is lost to runoff, deep percolation, we sort of have that ideal soil moisture conditions is called field capacity. Okay, so that's what the target is for irrigation scheduling is to maintain that soil moisture profile somewhere between field capacity and what we call management allowable depletion. And so generally speaking, that management allowable depletion varies with different crops, but it's usually targeted around 50%. And the reason that is because when we start to go below 50% of that management allowable depletion, that's when plants start to have a harder time extracting water from the soil. And so we start to see levels of stress. And then, we don't want to let the moisture get to permanent wilting point where the plants can no longer at all extract any water. Something else important to think about with soil texture is, again, that soil permeability. So you can see with sandy textured soils, how rapidly water can move through the soil without much resistance. But, different soil textures, the different particle structures are conducive to forming different structures of soil through the profile. And so as we have more silty and clay textured soils, we can have blocky textured soil. This might represent more of a loam texture soil where water is flowing through well. This might be like a heavier clay soil. And then sometimes we have these we have conditions where water permeates very slowly because the if we have a lot of clay textured soils, the colloids are stacked very tightly upon one another, and so there's not a lot of pore space for water to move rapidly. And so it's important to kind of have a sense of how water moves through the soil, because that's going to help us also understand how that affects what the max amount of irrigation time is. We don't want there to be standing water at the end of an irrigation set. That's not going to be of use to plants for uptake, and it's probably going to be lost to evaporation. And we also don't want to apply so much water that we're draining it below the root zone. And so this picture sort of illustrates that with respect to, if we have a drip emitters with some tree crops here. It's also important to think about how your texture soil affects subbing. And so, a clay texture soil, if we might get with a 16 by 20 foot planting, say we might get foot of subbing in either direction from the emitters. Whereas a loam or sandy textured soil, we're not going to get as much lateral movement of that water. It's going to be more straight down. And so these are, it's easy to over irrigate, to lose water to either deep percolation or potentially exceed your infiltration rate at the surface. And so when we get to the irrigation scheduling example, I'll mention that we want to consider what that percent wetted area influence might have on the irrigation set time. So, okay, crop uptake pattern dynamics. Depending on what crop we have, they're going to use different amounts of nutrients at different stages of growth. And so we don't always want to just be applying the same amount of fertilizer because the crop is only going to utilize what it needs at that specific time. And so a lot of field crops follow this what we call S-shaped curve, and there's some permanent crops like almonds I'll show in the next slide that do as well, where the uptake starts off slow and then it increases rapidly and then it plateaus towards the end of the season. So for an example for almonds, at the flowering, fruit set, and early leaf emergence stage, research has shown that the nitrogen that the tree needs during those stages is provided by remobilization of nutrient reserves from the roots and from the perennial woody biomass. And then as the leaves continue to expand, we usually say about 70% leaf expansion. Those reserves that are coming from the perennial tissues become depleted. And then at that point, we start to see root flush and soil nitrogen uptake from the soil increasing rapidly. In an ideal circumstance, we would be trying to match our nutrient applications as well as we can with that uptake curve. The information that we have about nitrogen accumulation and through the course of the season comes from some trials done by Patrick Brown and many other people, where they actually accounted for the nitrogen through the season. And so, as I mentioned, that 70% leaf out, even before up until that 70% leaf out stage, not seeing a lot of evidence of uptake from the soil at that point. By 100 to 126 days after full bloom, so maybe somewhere around like mid-June, they've gotten to this shell hardening stage, and that's where the kernels have gained about 60 to 70% of their total weight. And this is where the rate of the nitrogen accumulation tends to level off as we go into the hull split and harvest stage. Related to those studies, there was some research looking at high frequency, low concentration fertigation practices, and they found that did increase nitrogen use efficiency in that study. Thinking back at that first stage, this would be an example of where they were getting higher nutrient efficiency, so better crop uptake with minimal losses to those other pathways. More common fertigation approach, is to be getting on nitrogen early, and depending on the limitations of your fertigation system, people may be applying in much larger doses. But it's good to keep in mind that too early and too much in a single set does increase your leaching potential. So this is where if we're applying concentrations that exceed what is going to be absorbed by the tree roots, then that's susceptible to loss. There could be potential consequences for large applications, and this is from last spring, where there was a very unusual year. I guess we'll see what this year turns out to be like. But you know, everybody was having a hard time getting in early to get their nitrogen on. So I think there was a lot of the idea that you know, we need to catch up and get everything on. I know everyone you know, most commonly follow the practice where they try to get it on before maybe the beginning of June. So in this example, growers shanked in 50 pounds of UAN into the soil and then followed it up by flood in mid-April. And then soon after, saw quite a bit of scorching in the trees. And then when I went out there, you know, I saw a lot of drop nuts on the ground. Yeah, the trees looked pretty bad. And so we, you know, initially we had to go through a series of trying to troubleshoot, you know, what happened here. Because, you know, a lot of times these things can resemble disease or phytotoxicity of other, you know, other potential causes. But you know, this is really characteristic is that you'll have this, you know, this scorching, but then after over some time, the trees will start to recover. Whereas with other sources of phytotoxicity, you won't see this this leaf out on the terminals as the tree recovers. Just an example of how much, you know, if we apply too much in a single shot, not only can, you know, we be reducing our nitrogen use efficiency, but it's not going to necessarily benefit the crop. And then, you know, our nitrogen applications coincide with increased water availability in a lot of years in the spring months. And so, you know, groundwater recharge efforts are, you know, extremely important, but we just need to make sure that we're doing our best to separate our nutrient applications with when we might be working on those recharge efforts. Because if we don't, you know, if we're applying more water than what's being taken up by the tree, and we're pushing water down below the root zone with the nutrients, that's our recipe for leaching. So more on this concept, earlier I mentioned that high frequency, low concentration application approach, and comparing that with, you know, the more infrequent, heavier doses. And this is just a simulation to actually for corn. But the concept here was to try to understand with these different fertigation delivery methods, how much deep percolation of nitrogen there is deep in the soil profile. And so on the y-axis here, we have that deep percolation of N. And then on the x-axis, we have the percent deep percolation of water applied. So with the deep percolation, meaning, you know, water that's applied that's going beyond the root zone of the crop planted. And so as I mentioned, these different lines indicate different fertigation delivery systems. And so when we had a weekly or daily fertigation, there was lower percolation of nitrogen compared to a monthly or a biweekly fertigation. But overall, what this graph shows that regardless of the fertigation delivery method, if you're applying too much water, that's what's going to push nitrogen down below the root zone. And so that's why that's why irrigation and nitrogen management, we need to think of these as not as a separate management approach, but two things in the same. Just a little bit on fertilizer timing. You know, for our fertigation applications to have even distribution across the field and with soil depth, it's important to think about that timing with respect to where in the irrigation set are we injecting. So first, if we're doing a quick injection, so just like injecting everything all at once, this is going to risk, you know, leaching those mobile nutrients quickly. And then with respect to timing during the set, these graphs are looking at the effect of that timing at different points in the irrigation cycle. And so this first one with depth in the soil, this is looking at timing at 2 hours after the beginning of the irrigation set, so injecting at the beginning. The one on the far right is looking at injecting in the middle half, and then this middle one is looking at applying 2 hours before the end of the set. And then these different colors show the nitrogen concentrations with depth. And so basically what this is for a loam textured soil, shows that injecting at the beginning of the cycle, by the end of the irrigation, they'd already pushed a good portion of the nutrients, about more than 2 feet below the root zone. When they injected at the end, it was pretty shallow, and then in the middle is when they got the best distribution of concentration through the root zone. And so injecting at the too early, we risk leaching nitrate below the roots. Injecting at the end of the cycle, we might not have sufficiently moved nitrate into the root zone, depending on what our crop is. And then injecting at the middle, sometimes you see recommendations for the middle end of the set is going to be the most uniform distribution. And so we need to consider what the soil type is, going back to thinking about how water moves through the soil and the permeability impacts that, with helping with that timing decision. Something else that's really important is to think about with your irrigation system, what's the chemical travel time from the injection point to the far ends of the field. And then once the injection ends, how much time does it take for the system to be completely cleared, so we know that it's okay to turn off the water. And so you can actually estimate this, looking at the specs of your design based on the system design, the pipes lengths and sizes. Other recommendations have been to use a food coloring dye, where you can look at time 0 as the start of an injection, and then measuring the amount of time it takes, where we start to see the color coming from the ends of the emitters, and then making sure to know how long it takes for the color to end. So this helps us with understanding how long the fertilizer takes to run through the system, and ensuring that we're adequately flushing it at the end. If you don't want to mess around with dyes, another way to do this could be using an EC meter. So there's a lot of nice EC meters like this available, and the way that this works is that most fertilizers are going to temporarily increase the electrical conductivity or salinity of your water. And so you can, when you inject the fertilizer and you measure the EC at some of the most distant points, so at the furthest emitters, you can determine the travel time that way. And then you can note the time in between when the EC increases and when it goes down, to determine how much time you need to flush the system after the injection has been completed. Okay, so with irrigation scheduling, there's a lot of different methods and tools, and none of them are, standalone. It's good to use a variety of different approaches. We commonly talk about a water budget, so I was kind of alluding to that earlier when I was talking about soil textures and figuring out how much water we can apply within a single set. How much water do we need to fill the desired profile, and then how long is it going to take to lose that moisture from the soil? So we can compare the evapotranspiration with our applied water with the amount of rain that we have that's accumulated as soil moisture storage. So that's in the form of a water budget. We can use sensors in the field, but sensors only give us a snapshot of of that one spot in the field where we're measuring. So, it's also really important to, just use the shovel or auger and learn how to do texture by feel for different depths of the soil so that you can ground truth yourself what's been the result of what the irrigation set time that you've chosen. And then also looking at orchard water status. So this is going to be a good indication of how the crop is responding to the irrigation set. So I'll talk a little bit about the pressure chamber, and then there's a lot of new automated sensors uh, that can also give us a good indication of that measurement that we call midday stem water potential. So with the water budget, that it's can be difficult and sometimes early in the season confusing of when is the right time to pull the trigger and start the irrigation system. So there are online resources available. So Jarrett mentioned in the introduction this tool Crop Manage, and so it's a web-based application that you can input the location information for your ranch, and it'll input the ET, the evapotranspiration data from the most proximal CIMIS station, and it will adjust it with a crop coefficient to come up with what the irrigation schedule should be for that week. If you have on-site weather station information, you can also input that to make a weekly recommendation. You can also use this application to track your fertilizer inputs, any information you have about soil and tissue analyses, and yield information. And then this can help you with your nitrogen management planning recommendations for the future. So we're going to be hosting a workshop on May 15th at the Kearney Research Station in Parlier. And so for any of you that haven't attended before, this basically, you bring your laptop and we will help you get a profile started for your ranch, and give you an overview of how the program works and how you can use it through the course of the season. Okay, so I'm just going to go through two examples. One, trying to figure out what's that maximum water depth that we can apply per irrigation, so that we're not applying more water. And this is particularly important again during when we're fertigating, the portion of the season when we're fertigating. Try to make sure that we're keeping we're targeting water in the effective root zone. And so the effective root zone is what we measure as where the majority of roots are. So where 90% of the roots are. So I'll do an example here for an orchard tree crop with what we would think would be about an effective root zone of about 3 feet. So that's where we're targeting the moisture. Taking into account that management allowable depletion, so 50%. And then if we know what our irrigation system efficiency, we can also factor that into figuring out how much water we should apply in a single set. And so that water applied is just going to be that management allowable depletion divided by 100. And we're going to multiply that by the estimated water holding capacity for particular soil texture, and take into account the effective root zone and the irrigation system efficiency. So going back to this graph, it's also good to consider that, even though, ETC rate is, telling you what that is, what that evapotranspiration rate is for an acre of planted crop. It's good to consider the wetted root zone of the irrigation system if we're using micro irrigation systems. And so for this example, say you have 0.04 inch per hour, which would be the equivalent of about 8 gallon per hour output for a single tree. And we're going to take into account the wetted area. So for the example, it'll be a sandy loam. And so we'll factor that into our calculation of irrigation set time. And then with the soil texture and water availability, let's look at a sandy loam. And so this table shows for different soil texture classes what the inches of water are per foot of soil. So this isn't this is the that thinking back on that graph I showed in the beginning that showed the curve with the water availability. When you have sandier, coarser texture soils, less water holding capacity compared to loams and a clay loam, clay type soils. So for this example, we have 1.2 inches of water per foot of soil. So using that same formula I showed you before, and we've got that 1.2 inches at 50% management allowable depletion with an effective rooting zone of 3 feet and an irrigation system efficiency of 95%. So when we input those numbers, we take that into account, we can determine that we can apply up to 2 inches of water. So the max water applied per irrigation should not exceed 2 inches. Now, if we take into account, as I mentioned earlier, if the application rate is considering the wetting area, if our application rate is 0.16 inches per hour, we wouldn't want a single irrigation set time to exceed 12 hours. But during times when it's hot and ETC is high, it's going to exceed your max. It's going to exceed that maximum irrigation time. So this is going to tell you that we need shorter, more frequent sets, basically. Okay, and then in terms of irrigation frequency, another way to just sort of project maybe what's the maximum amount of time you should go between irrigation sets. You can use all those same numbers that I used before, the management allowable depletion, that amount of available water, 1.2 inches for a sandy textured soil. Here in the example, I changed the effective rooting zone to 2 feet with the idea that, maybe in the heat of the summer, we're trying to make sure that we're really kind of focused on making sure that we're not depleting below 2 feet. And our the soil moisture and field capacity, if we're looking at 1.2 inches per foot for a 2 foot rooting depth, we're looking at 2.4 inches, but at management allowable depletion, we only have 1.2 inches available for loss. If our daily ET in July is 0.3 inches per day, then we could say, okay, so if we have, if our soil cup is holding 1.2 inches and we're losing it at a rate of 0.3 inches per day, you wouldn't want to go but more than 4 days before you're reaching that management allowable depletion. And so these are just, this is just one additional tool that you might use to just kind of help you sort of troubleshoot and think about what's going to make the most sense. But always important to use multiple tools. So another thing is to look at our soil moisture sensors. And so with, there's a variety of different ones out there that can tell you what, your volumetric water content is. This screenshot in particular is looking at the KPA, which could also be measured in centibars. So that's tension. So it's a different measurement. But the thing that's similar about all of these is that when you get accustomed to looking at these graphs, to use them to figure out when you should irrigate, you should make sure for your soil texture, for your location, that you understand where on this axis is the point where that relates to that 50% depletion, that onset of stress. And so understanding what soil texture you have can help you target that, because that number is going to vary depending on if you have a more of a sandy textured or clay textured soil. And so for the example here, the grower has sensors at the 12, 24, and 36 inch mark. And you can see where, he's going above that onset of stress level. And then you can see where he's irrigated and shown recovery. You might notice here that the 36 inch doesn't seem to really really be recovering quite as quickly. It's taking some time for the water to infiltrate, to bring it back down. This particular site, he has some problems with hard pan. He's close to the San Joaquin River, and so there's some hard pan there, and so the water infiltrates very slowly. So it's also good, you know, to kind of keep those type of things in mind with the irrigation scheduling, is that you know your soil, you know to what depth it infiltrates, and so that should help with your irrigation scheduling. Say like in this particular situation, you know, he's really irrigating to the top 2 foot because of those problems with infiltration. So that means he's probably going to have more frequent sets of irrigation. Okay, so irrigating according to that water budget, and thinking about soil moisture in terms of just generally what soil texture do I have, or looking at those soil moisture sensors, doesn't indicate how orchard trees respond to the applied water schedule. So a measurement of what we call midday stem water potential kind of integrates and quantifies how an orchard, sorry, I'm so orchard heavy, but I'm a nut crop advisor, so apologies to those of you that are mainly in field crops, but an orchard is responding to the soil, water, and climatic conditions. And so this is another, you know, important tool that can help confirm or adjust assumptions that we make with those other methods. So this is a nice publication, the ANR 8503, kind of gives you a nice background on the pressure chamber, since I haven't had a lot of time to go into how to use it today. Okay, so and then because for those of you that have used a pressure chamber, you probably know that it's, you know, time intensive, and that you have to be out at midday sun, which can be very hot time of day to be out. So we've been doing a little bit of research. We actually just submitted a paper that's comparing different types of embedded sensors. So there's microtentiometers or osmometers sensors that are embedded in the trunk tissue, and they're connected to the vascular tissue. So these type of sensors can provide a continuous measurement of stem water potential. And we looked at different orchards all up and down the state, and actually found that that we were getting pretty good agreement between our measured stem water potential with the traditional pressure chamber, and what these osmometers or tensiometers were showing. So it's encouraging development for that technology. Okay, so in summary, you know, we want to make sure that the irrigation system is running well, you know, that we've got good distribution uniformity and efficiency. So if we have good DU with good irrigation scheduling, we're going to get good even nutrient application and retention in the root zone. With soil texture, it's really important to consider this for our irrigation set times to avoid leaching. So we don't want to be applying more water than that's going to percolate beyond the root zone of the crop, particularly when we're applying nitrogen. We want to apply our nitrogen irrigation to match uptake as best as we can, and that's going to result in the best efficiency and minimize losses. And our fertilizing timing, more frequent small injections has been shown to be more efficient, and it may result in less leaching than in frequent large doses. But as I mentioned, that deep percolation by over irrigation is going to be that biggest driving factor that's going to affect the nitrogen leaching. And then, you know, use a water budget, whether you're doing it on your own, you know, maybe check out that crop manage. There's a lot of other water budgeting tools out there available to you. Use some kind of measure of plant water status to see how the crop is responding to the irrigation scheduling. And then you can use that information to make adjustments. And so with that, you know, please send me an email. Happy to answer any questions. And as Jarrett mentioned, with UC, we're partnered up with CDFA on a program that's called the Nitrogen and Irrigation Initiative, and the idea is, if you want somebody to come look at your DU, if you would like help installing a flow meter, troubleshooting problems with water quality, anything irrigation related or nitrogen management related, we'd like to increase our ability to help you out. So I'm just one of a lot of different advisors that are associated with this program. So up through the San Joaquin Valley, and then also on the coastal areas, Michael Kahn and Aparna are over there in the Monterey area, Santa Cruz. But yeah, reach out to us. We'd love to just talk with you and find out, how we can help you address any issues you might be having. And actually, there's one more. I was going to see if I could possibly allow Elise Zufal to talk, but now I'm not seeing how to do it. So Elise Zufal is a cooperating partner with that nitrogen and irrigation program, and she's doing a detailed study to she would like to interview or oh, there she is. Okay, so let's see, can we?
Hi, May. Hi, everyone.
Oh, there she is. Okay, go ahead, Elise.
Thank you so much for the introduction.
Mhm.
Really happy to be here. I'm a researcher at UC Davis, and I'm really excited to be collaborating with Dr. Culumber and others at University of California Extension to understand growers' experiences with nitrogen and irrigation management. And this project puts on events about nitrogen irrigation, and I'd really value hearing about your experiences so we can improve our events. And I'm looking to set up interviews all through February and March. I'm also from a farming family, and I know how important it is for policies to be in touch with reality. So participating in this study is a really great opportunity for grower perspectives to be incorporated and represented in research on this topic. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know you more, and please reach out to me if you'd be willing to schedule an interview. Thanks, May.
Yeah, thanks. Please reach out to Elise, and she's been coming down to some of our in-person meetings, and so if you end up coming to any of those, maybe you'll get to meet her in person there, and she'd love to chat with you. And so we'd love to get some survey feedback from you. There's a short survey if you have time, and you can use the QR code, or if you prefer a link, you can click on this link. This is just asking questions related to nitrogen and irrigation management to help us better serve you. So we really appreciate your feedback, and thank you for your attention, and please reach out to me. Thanks.
Thank you so much, May. I really appreciate that great presentation. Hey, so we have a few questions here. I'll go ahead and just read them off to you. We also have, I know there was a Barbara that had a question too. Once I cover these, we'll swing back to her and see if she still has that question. The first one is asking, when they have an excess of surface water, they still use furrow to irrigate their stone fruit. How would you recommend that they get a sense of saturation of water using soil moisture probe and time readings after irrigation, possibly? Oh, I think you're on mute. There you go.
Sorry, of course, I always do that. Yeah, it is always a little bit more tricky, with the furrow or flood irrigation, to quantify, um, how much water, is gonna get you to saturation. But, I mean, there's different methods of looking at the length of the run, the depth and the width of the furrow to, give you an idea of what that applied water is. And then as you mentioned, like it's still the same tools in terms of yeah, I mean, you can use I mean, I guess I'm guessing with the sensors, you're not getting, it depends on if the sensors are within the range of where the water is subbing. So those may or may not be useful for that. So yeah, maybe using an auger and digging down and seeing how far the water might be penetrating. But yeah, it's a little more difficult with the furrow irrigation. But I've had a few people contacted me recently about that. So love to chat more with you about that. Please just send an email, and then maybe we could even meet out in the field and try to measure that together. So should I answer another question?
Yeah, thank you. Next one we have, is there a nitrogen efficiency factor for nitrates in well water? It's like they've heard somewhere between 25 and 70%. Is there a study?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't touch on that at all today with, doing like a nitrogen management plan. But when you account for, all of, sometimes we call it credits. So, for those sources of nitrogen, you would assume that, I mean, I think that we tend to think that that's, between 75 and 80% is, what, so I think that they mentioned a much lower number, but I think that, traditionally when we're doing those calculations, we just do that same assumption of 75 to 80% for that nitrogen. But yeah, I think there does need to be more research on what the true how that source of nitrogen truly compares with, your just regular amended fertilizers.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Next question. Are there particular characteristics you look for when using shovel and texture by feel to measure soil moisture?
Yeah, I should have provided a link. There's actually USDA NRCS has a nice site where it actually shows you some um, ways that you can, you know, you try to make a ball, and depending on the texture of your soil, like how much that you can ribbon the soil, and you can reference these charts, and it kind of gives you percentages of moisture. And then there's pictures for your soil texture, looking at how much residual soil there is on your hand. Yeah, if you Google USDA NRCS soil texture by feel, there's some nice illustrations looking at that.
Great, thank you. Next question, is crop managed designed for only drip irrigation?
I think you could, no, it does have micro sprinklers in it. I'm not sure about the flood though, or the furrow. But I know it definitely does have, and then I think you can do solid set also.
I think this is we have a couple more. The next question is, well, how can someone sign up for the May 15th?
Yes, sorry, we haven't put up the registration link, and Jarrett didn't even know that. I just threw that in right when the talk started. So I will be getting Jarrett and the Kings River Water Quality Coalition that registration information, and then we'll do our best to be advertising that widely. So hopefully you'll come across it maybe in one of the trade magazines or something as well. So if you have trouble finding it, you can always just reach out to me via email, and I'll make sure you get the link.
Great. Yeah, also contact the coalition. We'll point you in the right direction as well. Our last question, I believe, at least for you, Barbara still may have a question. How do you account for testing during heavy rain snow years where the irrigation districts ask us to flood irrigate as much as possible to help add to the groundwater in the valley? For example, last year, there was not an issue. I never saw so much flooding, irrigating in my area and so frequently during 2023, right?
Yeah, yeah, I don't pretend to know the answer to that because I mean, I know that, that we have no control over the timing of when they're asking you to take this water, and unfortunately when there is all that water available, it does coincide with spring when we need to be applying the nutrients. So, yeah, I don't know. It's funny. I haven't had a chance to read it, but it's on my desk. We have the UC has an agricultural and resource economics analysis, and I'm just looking at the cost effectiveness of using rebates for incentivized groundwater recharge. So it's like me, I mean, hopefully, if we're asking people to be taking these steps with the groundwater recharge, maybe there's something down the maybe in the future there's going to be something to compensate you, for the fact that you're, putting all this water on that's maybe not the ideal time for your crop. But I don't know exactly what the status of that is, but maybe that's something that's, coming in the future.
Thank you, May.
Mhm.
So Barbara had her hand up later. I'll go ahead and allow her to talk now. And Barbara, if you still have a question, go ahead and just chime in now. You can unmute yourself and ask away if you still have a question. If not, Barbara, if you still have a question, we will be sending out an email. Feel free to reply to that email and ask your question there. We'll get you an answer. Also, we will be providing the slides for both presentations in an email. So whichever email you registered with, just look out for that. Also, if you are needing to get a hold of Dr. Culumber and you don't have her information, please just contact us. If you're interested in a consultation with her, you can contact our office. Also, feel free to just reply back to the email that will be sent out with the slides and survey link and all that stuff. So, so I believe that wraps everything up. I don't see any other questions. Wait, hold on.
Oh, maybe they're asking about the survey. If you're not comfortable with the ID numbers, that's okay. I think I'm not sure if that question's in reference to the survey, but I think it does ask it for your ID.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think that is in reference to anything the coalition has to do with.
Yeah,
So.
I think it's a survey. So
Great. Okay. Yeah. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up again. Just expect an email. If you guys have any questions, call the office, reply back to the email. I very much appreciate everyone attending today. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the week. And thank you again for coming. Bye-bye.
thank you.